Okay, I'd like to call the Plan Commission meeting to order on Tuesday, October 25th, 2022 at 5:30 PM. Janelle, could you please take roll call?
Bertle,
Here.
Bell,
Here.
Gretzmacher,
Here.
Kane,
Here.
Zashki,
Here.
Schmitz,
Here.
and Shampoo.
Here.
Comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public. Well, I suppose before we get to that, we want to welcome Patrice, who threw her hat into the ring, and the board approved her last week. So we welcome you. Happy to have you. So we have a full commission now.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So is there anybody joining us that would like to address the Plan Commission? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any correspondence, Janelle or Julie, that you need to address?
There was a letter that was received from Bjorn Johnson shortly before this meeting. Mr. Johnson is the attorney for the Johnson family. And in his letter, he indicates that if the Plan Commission votes to change the decibel restrictions in the B3 district to anything lower than 85 dBA, the Johnson family is requesting that another public hearing be scheduled. He's alleging that such a change to the B3 district regulations was not anticipated based on the original proposed regulation amendments. And he also notes that he knows of members from the business community as well as residents and some frequent visitors to Sister Bay who would like to testify against such an amendment.
Is that everything?
Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you. Item 6A, noise regulation.
Don't we have to approve the agenda and the minutes?
Oh, did I skip right over all of that?
A motion that we approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Zashki, second by Gretzmacher. Gretzmacher, I apologize. All those in favor respond with an aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of September 27th, 2022 meeting minutes. Are there any questions, corrections, deletions?
I motion to approve as published.
Motion by Zashki,
Second.
second by Kane. All those in favor respond with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now we'll get to 6A, noise regulation. Reconsider motion made at September 27th, 2022 meeting. So the reason that I have this on here, and let me scroll down and get to it, is because that meeting went really long, and after thinking about some of the changes that we had made, for us to reconsider anything that we have done, it has to be at our next meeting. And I was uneasy personally with what we did in B1. So if we want to have another conversation about that, if anybody else is uneasy or wants to open up that conversation again, we would need a motion to reconsider. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Bell. All those in favor respond with an aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We might need to do a roll call, Janelle.
Okay. Bertle,
Yes.
Zashki,
Rob,
He's muted.
Sorry, yes.
Gretzmacher,
Yes.
Kane,
Yes.
Shampoo,
Yes.
okay, Schmitz,
Yes.
and Bell.
Yes.
okay. So let's open it up for discussion. With all the residential around the B3 I just thought that it was worth another look, and if everybody was in favor of reconsidering it, I don't know if you just wanted to have the conversation, but you still think that it's fine. So I guess I need to hear from the other commission members.
Denise, did you mean the residential around B1?
Isn't that what I said?
You said B3, but just for the record,
B1.
you meant B1,
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Mhm. And from my recollection, what we did in B3 was this, I think Rob had made the point at last month's meeting that it should just all be consistent. And so can you refresh our memories, Julie? What did we change it to?
Just real quick here, let me just, I don't want to miss a beat here. It would be 75 decibels. And some districts would be 10, some would be 11. Most would be 11.
And B3 was 10 or 11?
Well, what ended up happening in B1, B2, B3, so if you remember, we made individual motions, but they all ended up being the same. So in B1, B2, B3, it said the decibel limit would be 75, but in B3, it would be reevaluated in a year, and all the music should end at 11. Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
And Chair, Commission?
Yeah.
This has gotten so convoluted. I think we're losing track. If the commission's okay with it, I'd like to kind of just clean this whole thing up. I'd also like to propose some outdoor entertainment rules, and I'll tell you why. We've been talking about this since June. You guys were talking about it before I got here. The noise issue seems to be related to outdoor entertainment facilities. We don't seem to have a problem with anything else. You know, it's not truck braking, it's not dumpsters, it's not kids in the park. I think we need to take a step back and say, what is the real issue here? And I'd like the opportunity to just kind of rework everything and present something clean to you, for something different for you to consider, and see if maybe it meets the objectives, instead of doing all these little piecemeal amendments that I think are getting it very confusing, making it confusing.
What do other members think about Julie's proposal? I think that's a great idea. I think we're trying to address noise in a wide swath, and it doesn't pertain to probably most businesses unless they have outdoor music. So if there is something that we can incorporate into our code that is cleaner, would only affect those that do have outdoor music, I think that's a really great idea.
I agree.
I agree.
I think
agree.
that makes sense, and I also think that one level for all districts doesn't make sense. But that's something we can debate further once you bring back this cleaned up code, because a lot more debate. So let's keep in mind, though, that there, in some of the residential districts, it was pretty loosey-goosey, so that still needs to be cleaned up. And then just before you send it, I did read your staff recommendation about outdoor entertainment facilities. In general, it sounds good, but then you said that you were going to grandfather everybody that's currently playing music, so why bother?
Well, the way the law works is if somebody is doing something before the code changes, you can't force them to comply with that code. They're legally grandfathered. You can't touch them.
But if you can change the ordinance if you do not, quote, harm them, is that correct?
So let's say you have a rule for outdoor entertainment facilities, and somebody becomes grandfathered. If they go to expand or change use, they're going to have to comply with those new rules. You know, they'd lose that grandfathered status. So there is a handful, as we know, in the downtown business district that are going to end up getting grandfathered. And I'll be honest with you, they're grandfathered. If they don't have a development agreement, they're definitely grandfathered. Husby's is one. Our development agreements do, you have to comply with the revised code. So that's one thing that we have to look at. to see if the development agreement, for example, that's DeBoer had, is that in that code or in that development agreement? There's a lot of moving pieces here. There's a lot to look at. And I think it's just gotten to the point where we need to take a step back and look at it from a different angle.
I think it would be helpful with the point that David brought up is when you rework it, if you would be able to, the businesses that currently have outdoor entertainment, talk about which ones they are, why they would be grandfathered, who would not. Because I also remember that we were trying to make an even playing field. And if some people are grandfathered and some are not, that's not necessarily an even playing field either. So this is just so cumbersome.
It is, but we have to remember there's laws involved. So it sounds like everybody's okay with me just proposing something different. So let me just come back next month with something to consider.
Okay. And then we can debate all the merits at that point in time.
Sounds good.
Okay. And general consensus is, we're good with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, excellent. All right, agenda item 6B, review revised plans for Luna View at 2399 Maple. Julie?
Okay, so last meeting, we were all set to approve the development agreement for Luna View. And El Goki had said, wait a minute, after we made the motion and everything, he said, well, I changed the plans. And we're like, oh, you got to come back. What Al did was, due to the concerns over the blasting, he reduced the depth of the ground floor, some of the ground floor units, to completely avoid digging, or I shouldn't say digging in, but to make sure there's no blasting required. He wants to build around the bluff. So the units were reduced in depth. When he actually did that, he actually reduced the height of the building, which is what a lot of people wanted anyway. So yes, the plans have changed. I think this is probably the most favorable plan because it has the least amount of damage to the escarpment and the height is the lowest. I went through everything, the setbacks, everything still meets code. There's no issue. The only concern that was brought to our attention was a neighbor said, hey, I looked at the plans and they don't show the siding or the stone or the windows on, where the stairs are. And I reached out to the architect and the architect said, yeah, we don't normally put that on because when a portion of a building is stepped back, it starts losing its clarity. But he did submit some revised plans which showed stonework and cladding on that stairwell. My recommendation is that the development agreement be approved per the plans in the packet with the addition of the plan that was submitted today showing the siding and the cladding on the stairs.
Do you remember what what page that was on, Julie?
Yeah, well, the plans are on page 34 to 66, or I'm sorry, 24 to 32.
Okay, so you see no issues with the plans that were submitted. It's a better plan than what was there before with blast and height. Do any members have any questions or need any clarification? Otherwise, a motion to approve would be in order.
I have a question.
I've got,
Okay, go ahead, Patrice.
Pardon me, I'm new to this. I have a couple questions about this project. As far as them going into the bluff, it seems like it's putting the integrity of the bluff at risk. And I was reading in this packet that there will be some peeling of the escarpment, scraping and stripping that needs to be done. And I am just not in favor of that at all. Have has the planning commission and has the village gotten all the okays from like the geologist and the DNR and all that for this project to go forward, Denise?
Julie?
Yeah, we don't need it from the DNR, but what the plan commission did was to make sure there was no damage and to make sure that the escarpment, the integrity was preserved. We did establish a condition in the development agreement, which is the next agenda item, that says he needs a geotechnical engineer to evaluate it and make recommendations on ways to basically preserve the escarpment, make sure there's no damage. And then Mr. Goki has to do what the geotechnical engineer recommends. So that was to make sure that there was no damage or degradation to it.
Denise, I have a question. It's Rob on the phone.
Okay,
On page 24 of the packet, the staff memo from Julie, the second paragraph, second sentence reads, by shortening the depth, Goki does not have to dig into the bluff and can butt against it. Yet on page 36 of the development agreement, as Patrice just referenced, there is a longer, more clear passage that states he can strip, peel, etc. So my question is, the second paragraph, due to Goki's commitment to not blast, he shortened the depth of the lobby in a unit. By shortening the depth, he does not have to dig into the bluff and can butt against it. That's not exactly saying that's what's going to happen. And if that is if just because he does not have to do it and can butt against it, the development agreement still says he can chip, peel, strip, etc. So I'm questioning what's the point of that second paragraph of the staff memo, and if that is to come into actuality, that there won't be any quote unquote digging, stripping, peeling, chipping, and that this building will quote unquote butt up against it. Why isn't it spelled out that way in the development agreement?
Okay, so as he's still gonna have to strip and move stone on what I would call the floor, the base that goes under it, he is gonna have to move some rock around on the base. It's just that once you get into that slope, that steep slope, he's not gonna be blasting into it for the building. He's trying to work around it. So there is some movement that goes on to get the leveling, so to speak. I'm trying, if that makes sense, the floor of that foundation, you have to move some rock. It's not a perfectly level site. There's got to be some work that has to be done. But when you start putting the sides up, he's trying to work around the escarpment. As you know, with the last approval, we were okay with him even moving that rock on the side. Now he's saying, I'm trying my best to just work around it, and therefore he shortened everything up. As far as the development agreement, that language, it'd be our recommendation that stay in there, but you're also adding new plans, those that we're discussing right now, presumably, which would protect that and ensure that he's still working around it. So you have that one condition that says, that addresses the peeling and the stripping, but then you also have this one that says, and these are the plans you're going to be bound by, which are the ones that kind of work around the escarpment on the side of the building.
Ron?
Well, that's not spelled out, and that's, what I heard was he's going to try to work around.
Right.
And that's where I'm coming from, is that all may be well and good, but if, what's the point of saying, well, we'll try. Is it going to happen or isn't it? And if, you know, what I'm leery of is by the statement of trying to work around and a development agreement that essentially allows that effort to not get past trying or get to trying, if it's easier or chosen or quote unquote necessary to strip and peel into the bluff.
What, even though we're not on the development agreement agenda yet, to satisfy what you are concerned about, Rob, what if we added a sentence in there that talks about that he can only peel and strip and move the rock for the building foundation?
Yeah, that would be better than what we have, certainly.
Okay, so when we get to that, we can insert a sentence there. Ron, you said you had a question?
I'm fine.
Oh, you're fine now?
Yep.
Okay.
I
Is there
move
anyone
that we,
else?
No, I move that we accept the plans as submitted tonight.
Motion by
I
Schmidt,
second.
second by Gretzmacher. All those in favor respond with an aye.
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 Opposed? Aye.
Oppose.
Okay, motion carried,
Opposed?
3 opposed, 4-3. Okay. Now we will move on to item 6C, the draft of the development agreement. Julie?
Okay, so, what happens, is we don't have the ability to approve a development agreement. We actually make a recommendation to the board. The board is the only one that can commit us to a contract. So, before you have is a development agreement, we would want to add that condition that was just discussed at the last agenda item. And then make a recommendation, to the board if we're inclined to still, support the conditions in that development agreement.
Okay. I'd like, before we get into the development agreement, I just wanted to ask Al a question. Al, can you hear me?
can.
Okay, thank you. So I heard rumor on the street that you had sold some of your equity partnership, and I don't know if it has anything to do with this project or some other project that you have in the village. And because your name and Packerland Builders is on the development agreement, I just want to make sure that we're dealing with the right person. Can you clarify what I heard?
I'm not sure. I'm the only owner, developer, sole owner of Luna View. So I'm not sure if you're talking because I sold my condo, if that's what you're talking about.
Okay,
not-
all right. Has nothing to do with Luna View then. Okay,
No. I'm the only owner of it.
okay. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay, so then when we get to page 36, we want to insert under section 1, village approvals, 1A, that the developer will be allowed to scrape, strip, and or peel the escarpment where the building foundation sits. How would you want to word that, Julie?
I think, we would say he's allowed to do it for foundation purposes.
Okay,
And then we'd also want to make sure it includes that revised drawing that we saw tonight,
right.
or that was submitted.
Okay, well, and the date does say the site plan that was reviewed and approved tonight.
So we're good.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions on anything else that was in red or the development agreement in general?
Yes, I have.
Okay, go ahead, Ron.
On page 38, number 3. It says it'll be completed within 24 months of the date that he actually executes this agreement. I mean, he could hang on to this for forever without signing it and executing the agreement. We have no time limitation here.
Yeah, you know, you're right. That's what we do on our development agreements. I think because there is concern with the vegetation, you could put a finite date in there. And he would have to, if he wants the approval to move ahead, he'd have to abide by that date.
If you wanted to put 2 years from today's date, you could do that. There's been, I'm pushing off my other development. This one looks like it's probably going to start sooner than later. We're talking December or January. So if you even wanted to put in from the state, I would be willing to do that.
How about January 1st of 2025?
Sure.
That gives you a little bit more than 2 years.
Sure.
Okay.
Would
So-
that be acceptable to the plan commission members?
Yep.
Yeah, is there a reason why we shouldn't just make that the default instead of having a date signed, have it be the date approved? Like the 2 years out from there?
I'll give you my opinion on that. So this is what we do on our development agreements, and I do think it should be from the date approved. Not talking this case at all, but in general, if you're saying 2 years from the date somebody signs it, they could wait 5 years to sign it. And there's nothing that says it's valid.
I guess outside of this, I was just suggesting that maybe we should consider that. That's a great point, Ron.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this one was changed from all the other ones that we have done, and I can't remember what that conversation was about and why. But we've always, because other people have proposed other dates and we have said absolutely not, it's too far out. So, yeah, I think moving forward, and I also think it depends on what time of year it is, that we can have a little latitude with a few extra months. I mean, we're well into the season now. How much, if anybody was starting a project, how much they would be able to get done during the winter. So, but yeah, I think that's good. Start with that just being part of the template from the date that it's final approval, and then we can see what time of year it is, and if we want to give them a few more months latitude with that.
You know, just something to think about when we get there is we also need to look at the zoning district, because you got to remember some zoning districts, you can't do construction during summer.
Right.
That makes it harder to get projects done. And we don't want people hurrying and doing a job that may not be what we want in the village of Sister Bay.
And that's the reason that the original blank date was left in there, because each time the plan commission, basically spoke to the developer and said, okay, look, what date are you proposing that's within about 2 years from now?
Are there any other questions on the development agreement?
Just for edification or education, page 41, item 4. I'm trying to understand that. It's in red.
That would be a Julie question.
I'm trying to get there real quick. Well, if it's in red, that's something that we added, right? Something the commission added.
You added it because of Dan Klansky.
Oh, okay. Let me keep finding it here. Sorry, I'm on a laptop, so just bear with me. Item 4, the developer understands that the village cannot be held liable should any public infrastructure work be needed on site to service the property that could disrupt landscaping, parking, stairs, electrical, or retaining walls. Yeah, so if we need to go back and do some work on that property, or if we're doing work for our public infrastructure to make sure things flow, storm sewer, etc., and something gets damaged on that property, you can't hold us liable for it. You know, we're working on public infrastructure. We're doing what we need to do, and we don't want somebody saying we damaged the stairs and now all at once the village is on the hook for putting in all new stairs. So that is basically to protect the village.
All right.
Okay, so now before you get to the motion point, the two amendments that I wrote down are that page 35 of the development agreement should contain a provision that states that the developer will be allowed to scrape, peel, and strip the escarpment for foundation purposes. And then the date for completion is going to be January 21st, 2025. Is that correct?
January 1st,
January 1st, okay.
and it's page 36, section 1A.
Okay. Page 36, section 1A, okay.
Yes. Any other questions?
Denise, I have a question about erosion. Is that part of the geology study? There, whatever they come up with, the developer will go by all that with the erosion on the bluff.
Yes, that's covered in there with that geotechnical engineer report.
Okay.
Is there a motion to approve as presented and amended?
So moved.
Motion by Schmitz,
Second,
second by Kane. All those in favor respond with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, motion carried. Okay. I'm scrolling to find the next agenda item. 6D, parking plan, time, restaurant and catering, 1211 wine bar and provisions at 10339 Highway 57. Julie?
Okay, I'm not gonna go through what's in that packet. I trust everybody read it, but basically, at the last meeting, the commission said, Julie, go back through the minutes, go back through these audios and tell us why there's a discrepancy in parking in the numbers of what's required. In a nutshell, the developer was proposing one space per 150 square feet. And we kind of went along with that, but that's not what the code requires. So that was a mistake on our part. We should have questioned that. We should have said, no, it's a different number. And then in spring, when the numbers were recalculated, we used an old plan, but there was a new plan submitted in December. So the number should have been used on that plan. Bottom line, if the kitchen is open at the same time as that hoop house, we've got a major problem. There's not enough parking. However, they have told us that when they're in the hoop house, they close the restaurant. And when you do that, we have exactly enough. So that would be okay. So I think we can approve the parking plan with conditions. And then where this all started, of course, was the overflow parking. So we'd want to, I think, if we're inclined, approve that as well. Now that we know that's not being used to meet his day-to-day needs, it's really for overflow or in case the Historic Society needs the property. The questions, I'm sorry, the conditions show up that I'm recommending are on page 72. I'm just going to read them real quick, okay? The restaurant shall not be open for service or sales when the hoop building is in use. It is understood the kitchen will be operational, however, to prepare food for the event in the hoop building. 2, when there is live music, it shall be limited solely to the enclosed retail area depicted on the December 2021 plans. which are the revised plans. 3, the gravel parking area shall be paved prior to the hoop building being used, meet setbacks, and be landscaped. In other words, there's part of that parking lot that was never paved. 4, the dumpsters and propane tank need to be screened from view per chapter 66 and can only take up the 2 parking spaces marked on the plan as spaces 1 and 2. Because if he takes up more than that, we're going to have a problem again. 5, the overflow parking to be located on the Historical Society property is permitted, provided it meets setbacks, is landscaped per code, and is not used as a means to allow the restaurant to be open when the hoop building is in use. Condition number 1 above is still applicable, even with the installation of the overflow parking. With that, I will say I did talk to Mr. Raduens. They do plan on paving that gravel area. It's just that due to the time of year right now, they can't, so they would be doing it in spring. So he was okay with that condition. With those conditions, I think we're in a good spot to approve the parking and the overflow parking.
And all of your 1 through 5, it will be in the development agreement, these conditions?
Yeah, so if we approve this parking plan, we definitely want that into the development agreement. So that we'd add these in as well to make sure these were addressed.
Okay, and so what are the repercussions if we find that the hoop is being utilized and the restaurant is open?
I'll be honest with you, we've been through a lot on this. It's been very clear. The applicant has stated repeatedly, verbally and in writing that it will not be. I would say it's something we would just contact our attorney and go to get the permit revoked.
Okay. Okay,
I have a question.
go ahead, Ron.
This evidently all events will be inside the hoop.
Yes.
I mean, they use tents now. Does this eliminate the use of tents?
Not this part right, but here, but when you get into the next agenda item, I'm recommending that you not allow tents
Okay.
as part of that development agreement. So again,
Any-
this is just for the parking.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve as presented?
I so move.
Motion by Gretzmacher,
Second,
second by Bell. All those in favor respond with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 6E, preliminary development agreement for Time Restaurant and Catering, 1211 Wine Bar and Provisions. Back to you, Julie.
All right, the last meeting you had an extensive staff memo explaining the problems, the issues, etc. What it really boils down to is what you're going to find on page 75. These are the recommendations I have for that development agreement to make sure things are protected, that the intent of the code is upheld. 1, parking be per the parking plan approved on October 25th, 2022, along with the conditions established with that approval. 2, except for private events in the hoop building, music shall only be indoors and is restricted to the area identified as retail wine bar on the plans. That is because that's where they told us the music occurs. Number 3, hoop events are restricted to the inside of the hoop building only and are not to be outside that building. So that addresses the tents, and we could make that more clear, Ron, if you'd want, but it's basically saying if you're having an event, it's in that hoop building only. That's it. There's nothing else. 4, all lighting use a hood and lens that casts light downward and not onto adjacent properties nor toward the sky. And 5, noise is restricted to 75 decibels and all music shall cease by 10 p.m.
I think we should probably add tents in there, Julie, just to make it very clear.
All right. So we would add that there are no tents are allowed on the property, right?
Yes.
I will just add while we're thinking about here, last month we talked about addressing signage on here. Since that time, they have applied for a permit for the signage. We are pending the issuance of that permit until we know what happens with the development agreement.
Okay. All right, so next month you will present the development agreement then with what was in the packet tonight?
Right. Yeah, so what we'll do, this is basically getting approval of what we're gonna put in there. And then we'll come back with the draft development agreement in its formal form and see what happens. I just wanna make a little comment on that development agreement. Because he's not building roads and things like that, some of the stuff we see in the standard template, I'm gonna remove. Because if it doesn't apply, why do we have it in there? We can't commit him to building a road or putting conditions in there about a road if they don't apply. So I'm just gonna clean that up a little bit, but we'll bring that draft back to you next month.
Okay. So just general consensus is good enough then?
At this point, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Agenda item 6F, request to submit zoning application for hotel motel condominium, motion made at September 27th, 2022 meeting for 2374 Parkview Drive.
All right, so what happened was at the last month, we discussed this matter. We took a vote. And then we found out later that Marge had lost reception during the vote. So the vote, so we didn't have a quorum. We thought we did until we found out she didn't have reception. So there was no quorum for the vote. So we need to open it back up. You know, we can discuss it. We can move right to vote, however you want to do it. But what we did last month doesn't count.
I'm reminding everyone that I'm recused myself and remain recused for this part of the discussion.
Thank you, Rob.
Me also.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Marge, while you were connected, are you confident that you heard
Yes.
enough?
Yes, I did. I went out just before the vote.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Is there anything else that anybody would want to bring up again before we go directly to a vote?
I would say on this one that Patrice probably shouldn't vote on this because she didn't hear that conversation. Unless, of course, you listened to the tape, Patrice, but I don't know if you had time to do that.
No.
Okay, so she'd want to abstain from that too.
Okay, and you need her to say that publicly?
Yes, please. Patrice, so you would just mention that you're abstaining from a vote on this since you weren't present.
Sure. I'm going to abstain on this vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll make a motion to deny the request. Motion by Berto,
Second,
second by Bell. All those in favor respond with an aye.
Aye.
Motion, well, yeah, 4 people voted, 3 people are not voting, motion carried. Okay. Agenda item 6G, discussion on fourplex approved for 2387 Ava Hope Court.
Okay, this is on the agenda at the request of one of our plan commission members. Ron had asked that we put it on the agenda. I did provide a brief summary as well as a photo of what the property looks like right now. Real simple. We sold Miss Anschutz a lot, and then in spring we gave her approval to put what I call a used fourplex on the property. She needed to get some variances. She still has not applied for those variances. The building is sitting on 2 of our village lots that people have been interested in purchasing, by the way. I have written Miss Anschutz to remind her 2 times, hey, you need variances, you got to get going, you got to apply, because sometimes it can take 3 months to get a variance hearing. I've also, in those letters, at least one of them, maybe 2 of them, have talked to her about the fact that somebody was interested, the board was considering selling. You should be advised, you gotta get moving, you know, if this sells, you gotta get your thing off. One of the trustees also said he would reach out to her as well, and I don't know if he ever did. We do get complaints on this property. I would say not every week, but probably every 2 to 3 weeks, somebody is complaining about it. They feel that in a neighborhood of brand new buildings, that it's a bit of an eyesore. And I guess that's our involvement with it. You know, Ron, you had asked for it to be put on the agenda. I don't know if you had anything further you wanted to talk about, or if you just wanted an update.
Well, I wanted an update. I mean, that building is sitting there, basically, it's deteriorating. If that building was sitting on the corner of Scandia and Spring Road, something would have been done with it by now. I mean, my daughter even thinks that someone was living in it this summer for a while. I mean, it's an eyesore to the community. Something's got to be done with it. It just can't sit there. It's rotting.
Julie, would it be appropriate for us to make a recommendation to the village board that there is a time frame that she needs to apply for those variances and have a zoning board of appeals hearing?
Yeah, so I don't think we can give her a time frame on when to apply for them, but I think we can give her a time frame of when she has to get off our property, which would force her to either get rid of it or apply for the variance.
And what would be an appropriate time frame now that we're at the end of October?
30 days to get it moved onto her own property.
Agreed.
I agree with that.
Is that reasonable or doable? I know that we're a little agitated by the situation.
I don't
I think it's
that's
beyond
reasonable.
reasonable. I think we have perpetuated this situation to become what it is, and it's time to stop perpetuating it. There's 30 days to get it moved onto the owner's own property and off of the village property, period.
And that's just a recommendation anyway to the village board.
And then, yeah, and then Julie, I'm going to, as a side note on this agenda item, then I'll be in touch with you because in my opinion, this requires a special board meeting to be held as soon as possible.
So what I can do as well is let Ms. Anschutz know that the recommendation is going to the board, which will give her an extra 3 or so weeks until because if we tell her now and the board doesn't meet for 3 weeks, and she knows that there's then going to be a 30 days, she gets, you know, like 45, 50 days in there, which should help her make some arrangements.
Does this include, I've not been up there lately. Doesn't she have a bunch of stuff, some porches on the next property too?
She does. I didn't include that because it was kind of hard to tell in the photo, but so this house is sitting clearly on the corner lot. You know, this is the corner of
Ava Court.
Ava Court and what is it, Northwoods? And then if you would, the next lot over or behind this house, so to speak, is where the other decks are piled up.
Okay.
And then on her property, there's nothing.
Is the dirt gone?
The dirt is gone.
Oh, yeah.
It's been gone for quite a while.
Okay.
So we would need to summarize specifically everything on the 2 village lots that needs to be moved to her place.
Yes.
And it's the consensus of my fellow committee members that we want to let it be 40 or 50 days to notify her that it's going to the village board at the next meeting, and then let the board vote on that on the 18th.
I'm not in favor of spending another $1,000+ to hold a special meeting to address this. So if she ends up, if Julie informs her what our recommendation is, she has a little bit more time. I'm good with that.
I understand. hesitation, Rob, because in this circumstance, it seems like no good deed goes unpunished. But realistically, if it happens by the end of the year, is it really that big a difference if it's the end of November versus the end of December? I don't think it really has a consequential impact.
My only concern would be if there would be some reason where an attempted legal hardship could try to be undertaken based on frozen or winter or snow conditions.
I mean, that's my concern. She needs a variance because she's not meeting the setbacks, which means she needs to put in a foundation before she can set it in place on her property. She can't do that while it's on the property. I understand that the village has been taken advantage of for all of this time. The dirt was moved many months ago. All of this could have been addressed on her part with starting the digging and the foundation being laid, and why it wasn't, I don't know. And that's why I asked, is 30 days or even, 6 weeks enough to even get a foundation in? And are we just asking for more problems? I don't know.
I think what you're
thank you.
asking, I think what you're asking her to do, if you say 30 days or 45 days, you're just asking her to move it someplace else, which would mean out of the village, because there is no way we would get a variance request published in the paper and the ZBA organized in time to process a petition for variance. So I don't see her getting a petition within 45, a petition heard before within 45 days. And then you've got foundation issues, which you can pour in snow, right? I mean, a little bit of chloride in that concrete and it would work. But what you're really asking her to do, I think, is to move it out of here.
So
Find a different
Julie,
place to store it.
can you illuminate for us the efforts you've gone through to try and contact the property owner about getting the variance process started? And
She did do all that.
okay, I missed that. Okay. So, all right.
So I'd also want to, I'm in favor of making her move it, but I think we have to be clear that we want it off of our property, because if we use the fact that it's an eyesore, we would then have to talk to the historical society and have them move that big old barn that's been sitting on this 57 for the entire year too. So let's be clear on why we're making her move it.
Okay. Just so everybody knows, the barn has a permit, but we'd want it removed because it's on village property. I mean, when you look,
Yeah.
you look
The
at it-
building and everything on the second lot. We need a summation of all of her stuff that's on the 2 village lots, and it has to be moved off of our lots.
Okay, does somebody, Janelle, did you write a motion? And you're on mute.
So a motion was made by whoever and seconded by whomever that the Plan Commission recommends that the village board direct Paula Anschutz to see that her multifamily dwelling, as well as any of the decking or porches for that building, are moved off village property within 30 days.
Would someone like to make that motion?
I
I'd
so
like-
move.
Motion by Gretzmacher, second by Zashki.
I got a discussion question. I'm not
Oh, okay,
motioning yet.
okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
A second by Shampoo. Okay, Rob, discussion?
So are we confident that there is no other personal property of the owners other than the specific items recited by Janelle in the motion? That are we confident that, because we didn't say any of their personal belongings on village land, we went into specifics. Are we confident we've listed everything that's there, and that there's not a chance for them to come back and say, well, you only told me I had to move this stuff, that other stuff is still gonna stay there.
Well, there's the trailer that the house is sitting on.
Okay, so
But-
this is where my question is with the motion is, I believe we need to be very either succinctly generic in terms of saying any and all of your personal or effects or borrowed effects on village land, or we need to specifically make sure we say everything. Otherwise, we're gonna wind up with some of it still there. So we left out the trailer. Do we know if we left anything else out of the motion, Julie?
Well, not that I'm aware, but just so you know, you can't move the house without the trailer. I mean, the trailer is under the house, right? So, I guess if that's a concern, we could say, she has to remove all structures and items, she has caused to be placed on the properties.
Properties.
We can do that. Everything that she moved in place on village property.
That sounds good to me.
That's good with you. Was that Marge?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, now, so then this will go to the board in December, so she's gonna have 30 days from that date, right?
It would actually go to the board
Or
in
in November,
November.
I'm sorry. So she'll have to have it moved by the end of December then, or the third week in December.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay, a motion in a second. All those in favor respond with an aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 6H, condominium plat approval for the Cove condominium.
All right, so this is out by Pebble Beach. We approved the development agreement very early last year. I'm sorry, we approved the development agreement in December. And then they have now one of the requirements was, when you create a condominium, you have to come back with a condominium plat. They have presented a plat. It's been reviewed by the county. It meets county standards. It has, it's been reviewed by their attorney. It meets legal standards. I didn't see any issues that would warrant it not being approved, or non-compliant with our code. I did have one thing in here in the staff report where I was questioning whether we could ask them to perhaps pay for some improvements at Pebble Beach, and did speak with their attorney, and they're not inclined to do so. They disagree that it would follow the process for imposing an impact fee, and they also disagree or challenge, whether their people are really causing the need for that. So based on that, my recommendation would be to recommend to the board approval of the condominium plat as presented.
So they have presented their declaration, which basically has nothing to do with the village. Correct? The plat is just how they've divided all the property.
No, so the map and the declaration go hand in hand.
Okay, then I have a question on page 114. And I'm a little concerned about the view easements. And if anybody else had any concern about that. Or because this is all on private property, it doesn't matter, and my concern is silly.
It's not silly, but it's the folks over on the bluff have the same kind of an issue. They asked us to get involved with it and we didn't. There's that condo project, was it Hawks Nest or what is it?
Yes, it was Crow's Nest.
Crow's Nest, thank you. So, I mean, if they're not dealing with the escarpment, if they're not dealing with this, they can, and they're not violating any coding, I don't think we have any issues, do we?
Well, we do have shoreline removal rules which apply 350 feet from the shore. So we do have to enforce that.
And they had a very comprehensive plan, which is that they presented us that we approved, particularly where the owner's house is going to be.
Yeah, there's a condominium declaration wouldn't allow them to trump our code.
Right.
I remember in one of the many meetings that we had dealing with this project that we had asked for the delineation on the map of the 350 feet. Is it from the high water mark?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. From the
Uh,
ordinary high water mark.
Okay. So it went, I thought, pretty far in, if I remember correctly, past Little Sister Road, past the private residence and Grandma's cottage, across Little Sister. I have not been out there because I can't bring myself to look, to view it with everything gone. But I have heard that the property was, and probably it was on the plan because it was very complete plan, decimated of trees. So how do we make sure then that the 350 feet is addressed and there's nothing? Like I said, I haven't driven out there. I don't know how sparse it is. I can't remember exactly where the 350-foot marker is. Maybe there's no trees left within that. So it's a non-issue. I simply cannot remember.
Yeah, so basically, as you come into the property, 350 would be where the road is located, because the road is 347 feet to the ordinary high water mark. So basically the road would be your cutoff point where everything between the road and the ordinary high water mark, we're going to regulate the removal of vegetation. Of course, after that, we have different rules, but the ones I think we're concerned about here, along the shore are between the shore and the road. Now it does get a little, that 350 kind of heads east a little bit, but as a general rule, I mean, if you follow the road, that's a good indicator of
Okay.
what you can't touch. What I can do is, if we, what I can do is go out there and inventory what's there right now. There has been some work out there, so I don't know if it's been removed. We can tell if it has. And I can talk with Amy Sullivan, the attorney representing them, or can make an arrangement to go out there with them to make sure we don't have an issue coming up.
I mean, because we should be clarifying too, that they did follow the tree cutting plan that they had presented. And that nothing has gone astray from that plan that we approved.
Okay.
But Denise, this goes to a question I asked you a year ago, that once the plan commission signs off and then the village board signs off, who watches these developments and makes sure everything happens? And of course, we had that lull where we didn't have an administrator. So I'm assuming that between Julie as the administrator and Gillette or whoever's doing our inspections, that don't we sort of give them the tasked to make sure everything that we said had to be happens?
No, Dave, we had a motion, we brought forth to the board and it was approved based on what came up from the Green Tier Committee that any future developments would, and this went into effect after the tree cutting of the bluff for the Goki project earlier on the agenda tonight. There was brought forth to the board and approved that moving forward, any such developments prior to the preliminary plans of the development agreement being approved, or the preliminary approval of the plan, that a walk between the developer, the village administrator, and the director of public works would take place to ensure that there was, what the boundaries were to cutting, what the areas, that could be cut. I can't speak, with clarity based on remembrance to the exact wording of it, but I think, Julie, you recall when we put that through, right?
So what happened about, it was discussed, but it was never adopted. But what we did talk about was the fact that every building permit I've had so far, I've inventoried what's out there. I've talked to them about the trees. And we talked about these bigger ones to have this joint effort between Public Works and myself going out there. So we've been watching them. I mean, even on decks, we're talking to them about the trees,
Why was that not adopted, Julie?
Well, it never went to us in the form of a text amendment. That hasn't come,
Because
so, if we're gonna tell a landowner, hey, the code says we have to do this, it's got to be in a code. So we would have to do a text amendment.
okay, so.
But right now, as a matter of practice, we are doing that. So, so I'll go out there, they, like I said, they don't have an approval. I know that there has been some work out there. And I actually talked with the developer, I think that was yesterday, saying, you better not be doing work out there. We do have land disturbance regulations. We have tree removal regulations. So I'll run out there if I can tomorrow. I'll run out there maybe with Dan too and take a look at what's going on there.
It was my understanding that the intention was whatever formal process was necessary to essentially enact that process, not to just say we're doing it. So, so if we need a text amendment for that, can that be moved forward at the appropriate meeting?
Yeah, I think we can move a text amendment forward when we're doing other text amendments. I don't know if we'd want to spend the money just on one line, to amend one section, but definitely we can present that to the plan, present something to the plan commission, and then get it to the board and include it with some other text amendments. We can certainly do that. In this case, like I said, they had a development agreement, but they haven't had any other agreements, or I'm sorry, approvals. So we can run out there. I think if this is approved, that's kind of a red flag green flag for them to want to start doing more work out there. So we need to get out there and see what's going on.
Ms. Sullivan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Denise, I just wanted to respond to your initial concern about the view easement and its relationship to the villages or any ordinances or any law about tree cutting. And the last section of the view easement, it's section 4. It says the view easement is subject to any law, regulation, or ordinance which may prohibit tree cutting within the view area, which whether now or later imposed. So if there were any legal prohibition on cutting trees within the view easement area, the inclusion of a view easement by the developer in the declaration would have no ability to trump it.
And I had that highlighted also, and I know the words are there, but when somebody wants to do something, do they actually, contact the village or contact the board of directors, who then contacts the village to make sure whatever it is that they want done? Once we put all of these development agreements and other agreements that the village has with projects in the village. I think a lot of times they get lost in the shuffle, and maybe that's because we've had young administrators that didn't know enough about zoning. We didn't have administrators for a while. And it was my recommendation a while ago that I talked to somebody, I don't think it was you, Julie, it might have been Bo, that there should be, after a project is started, that, at the 3-month mark, at the 6-month mark, that it needs to be in a tickler file where somebody needs to go out and double checking to make sure that the agreement that we have with them is being followed. Because if nobody ever just shows up after the fact, we have other projects we're working with. I know staff is really tight for time, and there's so much always going on to find the time to do this, but I think it should just be some kind of process that we deal with for all projects.
Yeah, so just, I would say maybe about a month ago, Janelle and I had this conversation. When the building inspector goes to issue his occupancy permit, he gives it to Janelle. And I told Janelle, from this day forward, we do not give it to the property owner until we've had a chance to look to see if all the land use has been complied with, all the land use conditions. And until that happens, they're not getting the occupancy permit. That's
Okay.
really the best way we can get a grip on it, because we are finding projects where no one has ever went back out on them. And that can't happen. It just causes problems.
Right.
Julie, I can also help kind of bring some clarity on the tree cutting. We did abide by the tree cutting plan, and anything within the development agreement. We certainly would not want to be, out of that, what we had agreed to do. So we've abided by that tree cutting plan. We can all, of course, meet you on site to make sure that, you can take a second look at it along with the contractor who did it.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Anaj.
Yep.
Naj, I'd like to also just mention that for the record, had you been at prior meetings when this was all discussed, myself, as to my recollection, others mentioned historically how you and your team did pay, you were a working partner in the whole process of the landscaping, and that in fact, getting that right and getting the tree removed, what had to be cut, what had to stay, that in
Yeah.
fact, that's part of what had, delayed the process, because you
Yeah.
guys were working to adhere to that. So I
remember.
So I think we, the commission, need to, in another format, in another evening, get into that potential text amendment to put in place. This is how this is going to be inspected ahead of time, rather than just relying on, the process as it's being carried out without any documentation moving forward.
Yep, we'll put that on a future agenda when Julie has time to come up with that wording.
So with this one, if we're inclined, we would make that recommendation to the board, because the board is going to have the final approval.
Are there any more questions, comments? Then a recommendation of a motion to recommend would be in order.
Okay, so what your motion is gonna want, you wanna make a motion that you guys approve the preliminary plat, and then it gets forwarded on to the board. The final plat does.
So moved.
Motion by Zashki,
Second.
second by Kane. All those in favor respond with an aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm still scrolling to find the next agenda item.
page 195.
Thank you. Item number 6I, library sign at 2323 Mill Road. Julie?
All right, this is a silly one. I hate to waste your time, but this is what the code says. When it comes to public facilities like the library, if they're going to change their sign, it needs plan commission approval. So the library has a sign out there. It faces Mill Road. They want to turn it to face the driveway, basically, which runs along the side, so that when people come in, they can actually read the sign. That would also mean that they would paint the back of the sign because it would now become a two-sided sign, if I understand correctly. Ron does have some information on this if he has anything to add. We gotta let people know where our library is. It meets setbacks, it meets size standards. The color doesn't change. They're just pivoting the sign and painting the back of it. But it takes plan commission approval.
I think I think it's just funny. And that's fine that they want to do that so more people can see it and whatever. But with the numbers that they have and the increases that they see every year, I think they're finding the library.
What we're trying to do, Denise, though, is to make it, people drive in not knowing whether it's open or closed. And by being able to have an open or closed sign there, that will help. So you don't have to pull all the way into the driveway to see the sign on the door. So there's that part of it too.
Oh, I didn't even see that drawn on the bottom. I
There's an
missed
open
that.
si- Yeah, there's an open sign on the bottom.
Okay, all
So-
right.
Is this going to replace the open sign that's in the window right now?
Yes,
Okay,
Is this illuminated only when it's open?
yes.
I mean, that sounds like a really silly question, but I've seen plenty of the times where that's not been the case, and that's one time I'm absolutely opposed to such signage.
No, there'll be a switch inside where the girls will light it up when they open the doors.
Okay,
So the sign with the hours by day will still be up there though on the door, right?
The hours by day, but not the open or closed sign.
And I apologize, I didn't bring the open or close sign up. That was previously approved, so I didn't include it. So,
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
I
Second,
second it.
Motion by Berto, second by Champeau. All those in favor respond with an aye. Aye.
aye,
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Agenda item 6J, text amendments, mobile food vendor court referral from village board.
All right, we spent a lot of time on the mobile food vendor courts. So people would be able to have food trucks here, or what we call mobile food vendors. It went to the village board, and at that time, Rob had raised concerns about us allowing formula businesses here, which are, chain restaurants, basically. The board had also questioned, did we take all public input? So they sent it back to the plan commission. So I think it's an easy fix. If we, just tweak it a little bit. My recommendation was here, I gotta look at this. The village could simply disallow, so we could just add a line that simply says, village does not allow federally or state recognized registered franchises and require the vendor to be a business founded, incorporated in Wisconsin. That would be my recommendation.
so I guess a question on that. We've had a number of other administrators tell us that we cannot do that.
Well, so here's the deal. People tend to think that we have an ordinance on formula businesses, and there's been a lot of work done on it. We don't have anything on the books to that effect. I've never been told we can't. I was not told we couldn't. That's something I think we could ask an attorney, but I think it's something that has been thrown around for a number of years and some board members think is already on the books, but it really isn't on the books.
It's under, we have it defined. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm off camera. We have it defined, a formula business, a principal use or accessory use that is one of a chain or group of 3 or more establishments and which satisfies at least 2 of the following descriptions. It has the same or similar name, brand, trade name, or trademark as others in the chain or group. Number 2, it has any of the following characteristics in a style which is distinctive to and standardized among the chain or group. A, exterior design or architecture. B, interior design and layout. C, uniforms, except that a personal identification or simple logo will not render the clothing a uniform. And D, standardization product offerings. So we defined it a long time ago, I believe, when Bob Cuffrin was here, and we were when we were talking about Subway coming in. And so because of the definition, I think that we don't allow them. Now I'm looking in the index to see what other pages it might be on.
Yeah, I'm doing a search right now, Denise, to see if I can find it.
Well, a number of years ago, there was that moratorium imposed on formula restaurants. That was back, like, I want to say 2012 or 2013. That is expired.
There's formula restaurants on page 67, 69, and 160.
So in the restaurant overlay district, it talks about it. That would be, if you're looking at the code, that'd be page 67. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure where the restaurant overlay district actually lays. It's in the code, it's not on the map.
Well, we need to get it on the map.
Yeah, I don't know what the intention was here.
I believe it was, it addressed all the
Yeah.
business districts. So that,
You're right,
need-
commercial districts, it says, it talks about commercial districts. So that'd be B1, B2, B3.
so we need to have a map amendment and I know it took forever and we just got it dated June of this year.
You know, let me take a look, if you guys are okay with this, I hate to keep postponing this text amendment, but I'm not that familiar with that overlay. Yeah, I've never used it, you know, it's not on a map or anything. If you guys are okay with it, let's just table this until I have time to research that and see the impact or how that would impact this text amendment or vice versa.
Rob?
I just have one question before we do that or consider doing motion towards doing that. We had asked, or it had been voiced by consensus that Chris Church be allowed to come join the meeting tonight to discuss any issues that he wanted to discuss regarding the proposal. And I'm just wondering if it is a benefit to us now to have him add his thoughts that were requested? Or is it beneficial to have him wait until whatever gets put together by Julie?
Well, I would have to take consensus from the other members, because we did have a public hearing, no offense, Chris, where, you know, that was the appropriate time to speak on any issues. We did not make a decision that night. I forwarded his letter to all Plan Commission members that night that I had received. Plan Commission had read it, so I don't want to make that determination. It would not be whether or not Plan Commission wants to hear more testimony. And I didn't say anything to Don at the village board meeting. I don't know if he was aware that Chris was at the public hearing, that he and his partners had sent a letter that was given to the Plan Commission. So what do the members want me to do?
This is not a public hearing.
I think if we're gonna table it, I would encourage Chris to submit something the next meeting, just in writing, just to state his points. I mean, that's something he absolutely has the recourse to do. So we can hear him again, we can take further input, but I think you're right. We had a public hearing and it's closed now.
Is that all right with you, Julie?
Yeah, I think so. At some point we have to move on. I mean, we had the public hearing, held off and said, hey, we have this letter, let's get some more information before we make a decision. I think we've really been pretty good about trying to hear from Chris. You know, at some point we have to make a decision and make a recommendation.
Okay. All right. Well, we will address then. Do we need a motion to table?
Yeah, but before we do, can I just say something? So
Sure.
I think what you're gonna see, and I hate to do this, but I think what you're gonna see when I'm looking at this is, I don't think we're gonna be amending what we created, what's in front of us. I think what we're gonna do is end up amending this overlay to say that it includes mobile food vendors. Because the overlay is very specific, just reading it real quick here, B1, B2, B3, and it applies only to restaurants. The food trucks are not considered restaurants. So
Okay.
if we don't want if we don't want formula food trucks, then we'll have to include them in that overlay. So I'll come back next, if you want to table it, I'll come back at the next meeting with something on that.
Okay. Well, that sounds much cleaner, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll make a motion to table till next month.
Second,
Motion by Berto, second by Grutzmacher. All those in favor respond with an aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried. Item 6K, text amendments, mobile food vendor license fee. Julie?
All right, so as you know, we have the mobile food vendor court, and then we have the one that says operators or vendors need the license. And we have to decide what fee they're going to be charged. I think we need to just present something to the board. I think it goes easier that way. I think it's better that way rather than have them debate things on the floor. So if we want to make a recommendation on what that fee should be, let's do so, and I'll incorporate it into that ordinance that goes before them. Just real quick, just to share some information with you, liquor licenses, we have two different kinds. One's a very simple one, one's a little more labor intensive. So the costs are $100 or $500. I would say with this, we're going to have a lot of checks. We have to do the background check, which we might end up paying for. I'm not sure. Depends on how willing the sheriff is to help us with that. But there's a lot of work there. So my recommendation would be it'd be the same as the more advanced liquor license, and that fee being $500.
Questions? I make a motion, we recommend to the village board that the license fee be $500 annually as presented. Motion by Berto,
I'll
Second.
second that.
second by Champeau. Any further discussion? All those in favor respond with an eye.
I,
I,
Opposed?
Opposed,
Carried. Who was opposed?
opposed, Rob.
Rob, okay, sorry, I clicked over on my screen. Okay, agenda item 6I, code interpretation of R2 zoning.
Real quick, whenever you look at an R2 district right away, from a planning perspective, you think, oh, a duplex is allowed there. Our code does not allow duplexes in R2. I believe it was an oversight because it allows single family dwellings. It allows multifamily, which is defined as more than two. But it misses that middle one, which is the duplex. So you can have one, you can have three, but you can't have 2 units. I believe it was an oversight. I'm looking for a policy interpretation on this. And then we'll come back when we do amendments to actually include it in there. Was it our intent to have a 2-unit in an R2 district?
We should allow duplexes in R2.
Thank you.
Seems only logical, doesn't it?
yeah.
There had to be, I'm just thinking way back when Cuffrin was here, there had to have been a reason at the time that we must not have thought that was a good idea. I don't know. I mean, it's such a simple thing. It seems like it was left out purposely, but I simply cannot remember unless I asked him. But
You know
yeah,
what?
it
Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay. Is that by consensus?
Sure, that we can do a text amendment at some point in time and have a public hearing along with the others.
Okay. So the understanding was, yes, duplexes would be allowed there. Okay. Oh. Sorry. Didn't mean to get ahead of you, Denise.
Agenda 6M. Oh, I guess that wasn't an I, that was an L, the previous agenda item. Building inspection and fees, privatized service.
All right. So what I want to talk about here is something that's different and something to help us pay for infrastructure. So let me just explain it a little bit. Right now, our building inspector has the ability to approve the plans for homes and smaller commercial buildings. But once you get the big buildings, it goes to the state. The state recognizes that they have challenges reviewing those. It takes them a long time. So they recently passed a law that said private companies, which they give their blessing to, can do those reviews on behalf of the state. I think there's 2 companies that do it in the state. Anyways, so there's a company out there, which our building inspector recommended, because what happens is you improve customer service, because instead of taking, the several months that the state takes, this company can review these plans in as little as 6 days. So people are getting their plans approved quicker. They're getting their development going, things of that nature. So there is that aspect of it. One of the parts I like about it is right now we can't charge anything extra on what Brett collects, but with this privatized service, we can actually increase the fee. So the state has a set fee. They have to get that amount, but we can charge more than that and we can keep that. So we charge what the state requires. This privatized service can take, I think it's 10%, and then we can charge what we want reasonably above that and use it for our purposes. My thought was, we have all this development, they're impacting our trails, they're impacting our parks. They're not contributing financially to that. We're getting creative to pay for stuff. Let these bigger developments be charged more for these reviews, and that additional fee, which I would call a community development fee, goes in a fund to actually pay for the parks and trails that we need for the added visitors, the added residents that are coming here. I can bring in details about what those fees look like. We could discuss and make some recommendations. Before I went through that effort, though, I wanted to see if this is something we were interested in learning more about.
So my question is about the community development fee. Is by going with a privatized company the only way to implement that? Because I don't know how much more big development we're going to see for a while. Maybe it's out there, maybe it's not. But when you have, you know, even some of the smaller condominiums put up, why can't they pay a community development fee? And how do we incorporate it for those that are impacting all of that Sister Bay has to offer in our infrastructure?
Yeah, we could, I think we can increase the fee that Brett charges. We'd need his cooperation on that to make that. I will caution you that, and I support that, and I can look at every possible way and bring that back to us. I would hope, though, that we would not be charging on single family homes and such as homes under a certain value, because I don't think we want to impact the workforce or the workforce crew or the low and moderate families that we have, that we're trying to find housing for. So
Is there a legal way, which you probably don't have the answer for, we'd have to look into it, that if you are building a home and you are not going to live in it year round, and you're going to get an STR permit, that you pay a community development fee?
I believe there's a way to do that. Let me work on that. If that's a consensus, let me work on that. You know, it's kind of like in the impact fee. I just have to figure out the legal way of doing it and work with
What
Randy
does
on
the
that.
rest of the plan commission think about that?
I agree.
Because it kind of
Yeah.
falls back onto Nate's thing. Was it Canada, Nate, that you were talking about,
Vancouver,
okay, Vancouver.
you pay a fee, you pay an additional tax if it's not your primary residence, or if you don't live in the area. But there was no real way to do that, is what Randy kind of told us.
Rob?
I would just be two points. One, to your question, Denise, I would want us to be cautious or review the legal advice we got when we were considering and discussing the significant dollar amount of a license fee for the short-term rentals. And I believe the answer came back that we couldn't put the extent of the fee that we wanted on that license because there was some state law that limited or prevented us from having the fee as high as was suggested. Does anyone
Yes,
else recall
right,
that?
but this is not a fee. This is not a.
Well, it's a
this is not
community development
license.
fee. So my question is, do we need to make sure that whatever fee we would come up with and propose would not come back to us under some law to say, well, that's too much of a fee?
I guess I would look at that as if Julie brought it up here, that's her job to figure that out. And if she thinks she can do
Right.
that, I think let's give her direction and let's let her go and do. I'm pretty sure she's aware of the issues that were brought up. So I think that we should just let her go figure out. She knows our broad goal, and give her a chance.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah, I
not suggesting that we should look it up. I'm just saying, should we, as an oversight board, make sure somebody does, when it would seem like she's
I
obviously.
think Julie knows, and I think Julie is going to do that. I think that's part of the direction we'd be giving her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
then-
I think what you're talking about is a permit fee. In the state of Wisconsin, your permit fees have to cover the cost. You can charge for the cost of expenses, but you're not supposed to make money on it. Okay, that's your permit fee. But then there are other fees that can be charged on top of that, and that's what we're talking about here.
correct.
So
So then
I'll work on that.
My
Okay.
question then for you, Julie, is on page 206 in the staff memorandum on this, it says several communities, one in Door County, have decided to use the private service. My first question is there a reason legally that we can't be told who the community in Door County is that has gone in this direction? And if there's
Oh, yeah,
nothing,
I could tell you that. I just don't remember, Rob. It was, I believe it was in Southern Door.
so my point on that is, if we know the community, it would be beneficial to find out from them, in my opinion, how they have found using this private service and how it's benefiting, another
Sure.
community in Door County.
Sure, we can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of a national trend to privatize some of those. Another thing is some areas are bringing electric programs in-house because you can do it quicker and you can make money on those electric programs. I don't want to go there. We don't want to do that. But on something like this, we can take a look at it. I'll try and get that information. I will get that information and report that back on who the other municipality is.
Okay, I think you have the green light.
All
So
right.
we move on to agenda item 6N, Public Works Maintenance Building Recommendation to Rebuild, Location to be determined. So when we were dealing with this at the board last week, and the agenda item was to hire a company to design a parks building. The board had had some discussion at their special October 4th board meeting that I did not attend. And they had all voted to move this forward. And so when it came to the board to actually take action on this, I was very uncomfortable that we would be hiring a company to only look at a parks building when we did not have a site plan that included the Wilsey property, the sports complex property, the cold storage for the parks maintenance out on Autumn Court, the long-term marina parking, the dog park. If we want to, because I think it's our job to look to the best of our ability and to have as much information possible 50 years into the future, and to hire a company to only address the parks building, to me, was putting the cart before the horse. So the board kind of did a 180, and we need to start working on that. Julie has contacted, and I'll let her talk about that, Bay Lakes Regional Planning again. But I think we need an all-encompassing plan to know what goes where, what we currently have, is it in the right spot, and what do we need new? And because I had, as an example, I had brought up that what if the parks building and the administration building were in one really large building? And it's cheaper to build one building than it is two buildings, and to utilize all of that property efficiently, we want to put in the least amount of roads, parking lots, and sewer and water. So we need an entire plan. And along with that, I also called Julie today when I was reading the packet to make sure that she knew about something else that has been talked about, but never has really been followed through on. And that is conversations with our fire chief. And I know our fire station is, a couple of decades old now, still very functional, still very usable. No, the fire department is not asking for a new fire station to be built, but with what has happened in Sister Bay in the last 20 years, with the beach, with the development. The fire chief has said they would never build that fire station where it is now because of the access out onto Mill Road, the narrow road, the bad intersection, etc. So I kind of gave Julie all of that background and told her that that needs to be also part of the conversation that we have. If we rule it out, we rule it out. But it needs to be part of the conversation. Can we utilize that for something else and get our fire department someplace better for them trying to get out to service their calls? She did say that she was going to call Chris and get some more details and background information than what I could provide. But that's kind of why this is back here. I think we need an all-encompassing site plan to know everything. And I don't know if Julie wants to chime in now. Sorry.
Just that I did reach out to Chris. He wanted to meet Friday. I said, how about Thursday? He said, I'm gone till Thursday. So we're going to meet next week. Just kind of, I want to, and I talked to Dan Klansky a little bit about the idea. I talked to finance director about the idea a little bit. I want to look at, we want to look at the floor plans that we have on file and just look at it. I mean, I think it's a good idea. Let's consider that. But one thing that I'd like to do, and I think I shared with Denise, was that to get the ball rolling, call the ad hoc land acquisition committee, because they are the ones who had recommended an admin building and a parks building go on the Wiltsey property. So I don't want to overstep their toes. They made a recommendation. We need to respect that. And then call the plan commission, who does, is responsible for planning here. And we're not just about codes, right? We're actually doing some planning. And then the Parks, Properties and Streets Committee, who's responsible for our properties, and have those three together on a Zoom call and have Bay Lake lead us through, as Denise said, an actual formal planning process where we look at everything comprehensively, all the properties, the pros and cons, kind of do, I don't want to say a feasibility study, but the exercise of pros and cons and come up with some recommendations so we can actually move forward, stop letting the buildings deteriorate, and actually move forward and start being, get into facilities that we actually take care of. So I'm going to work on that. I did contact Bay Lake. She's waiting to hear back from me because I told her I would schedule something. I wanted to wait until after tonight to see what everybody thought, and then I'll schedule that joint meeting to begin that process.
How does that sound to members, Rob?
I just have, that all sounds fine. I do have one question about the staff, a point made on the staff memorandum in support of this. On page 208, when after the summary leading up to the fact that the village board voted for the Parks Maintenance Building to be rebuilt on either the Wiltsey site or the sports complex, the pros and cons that are listed in the staff memorandum, the second bullet point of the cons, states the concept plan said the building should be adjacent to or part of the administration building, and it also said the administration building should have a capacity such and such. Putting the public next to open storage, mowers, etc., is not only not safe, opens us up to vandalism, but due to the unsightly nature of the equipment storage and dirt and grass they track all over, it isn't visually appealing. It might trash it up. So my question is, if we currently have a parks and maintenance building that's right next to the library that has virtually the same capacity, and to my recollection, having lived here for many years now, never having seen open storage of equipment, etc., in the vicinity of the exterior of that property or the library, how would relocating that building as it exists and operates today to the Wiltsey property create these scenarios?
That's a really good question, Rob. It's because you're only looking at half the operation. You have to remember the other half of the parks maintenance operation is out at the cold storage facility. And behind there are, I mean, Eric has done a tremendous amount of work cleaning it up, but I guess just for information purposes, you should go out there and walk around that building and look at the back of it. It's,
I don't recollect the motion that we made to have the Parks and Maintenance building next to the library relocated out to Wiltsey. I don't recall attaching to that the cold storage building had to be part of that relocation.
Well, this is in Julie's staff report. Is it? I don't think we have to deep dive into her staff report. If we're going to be meeting with Bay Lakes or whatever, we can hash everything out then.
yeah, I mean, my staff report basically, in my mind, why would you keep it divided? If you're gonna rebuild it or move the facility, you put all their stuff together so they're not wasting all this time and money driving back and forth and driving back, you know, I mean, that's, and again, Denise is right. It just says, this is
Okay.
my opinion, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so do the other members think that this is a good idea so we can get a plan so we know what we're doing and the village can move forward with their CIP?
Absolutely.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Do it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, agenda item 6O, direct seller regulations review.
So this came up when we were talking about time in 1211, where I brought to the Plan Commission's attention that we have what I call an obsolete, an old code that says you can only sell if you're a Sister Bay resident. You can't sell, you know, if you're having crafts or you have vendors or whatever, they can't be from outside of Sister Bay. Nobody's I don't think anyone's following it. It's kind of limiting. I think it should be removed, but the Plan Commission said, hey, we want to take a look at it. So it's included in the packet. From a staff's perspective, you know, my recommendation would be to recommend to the board that it be removed, because I just think it has not been enforced. It's not reality. We have vendors from outside Sister Bay at every event and in our shops. So
I guess I don't know, I tried to tap into Ron's memory here. Do you remember why this is there from way back when?
Way back when, I think everyone was afraid at Fall Fest that there were direct vendors coming in, and also we had some requests, some really strange requests of people wanting to set up on the streets and to sell, and we had nothing on the books to regulate it. I mean, I remember I had one person that wanted to set up a stand to sell chicken. But
Essentially, it's being, for a pattern of years, it's been quote unquote regulated by SBAA's running of the event, which, or involvement in it, which has prevented any wildcat scenarios, correct?
that's basically right.
So it seems like this is a moot code that doesn't apply and is not the way it's written applicable, or and not being followed. And I don't, and I say that believing it doesn't necessarily have to be followed, because a lot of those vendors wouldn't be at Fall Fest if we were following this.
Yeah, when I looked at it, I kind of viewed it as when this was created, it was a way to help our local artisans. You know, if you're gonna sell something here, our people are the ones who get to sell here. But that's not the reality of what's happening anymore. So if everyone's okay with it, I would pose an amendment to the board to have it stricken from the municipal code.
And so there's nothing in there that we would, by removing it in its entirety, that we would be caught in a situation where we can't point to something and say, well, it's not allowed because it's here.
I don't see any cross-reference to this.
Okay.
I don't see how it would impact it.
Okay.
Why do I think there's something in, for the farmers markets though? Is there a requirement for it being local?
Yes.
Yeah,
This would not undo that.
Not through zoning, we're not requiring it though. I mean, Denise, you're talking like SBAA requires it to be local?
No.
the farmers.
It states that it has to be grown here.
But that, but I don't, so I guess my point on that is there's rules that say that, but that they're outside of this. I mean, this,
Okay.
if you got rid of this, you still have that in another code.
Yeah, it's the easiest is to just look up definitions, and it's defined as a public marketplace where fresh foods are sold by the residents of Door County who have grown, gathered, raised, or produced them.
All right, thank you.
Were you reading in the zoning code, Denise?
Yeah, under definitions. Yeah,
Okay, so if this is gone, you still have that in the zoning code.
yeah. Okay. Do we have general consensus, or do you want us to make a formal recommendation? I think we should make a formal recommendation to the village board that it be deleted out of the municipal code. Motion by
So
Bruno,
moved. Oh, second.
second by Zashki. Any further discussion? All those in favor respond with an aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Item 6P, Parks District List of Uses Review. So what I did today, reading the packet, is I pulled out the newest zoning map that the village has. And when I looked at what exactly was currently zoned park, and I'm not saying that we might not end up with some more parks or neighborhood parks in the future, whether the village owns them or not, it's a different story. So we have to the southwest, we have obviously the corner of the past. We have Gateway Park, where the old log cabin is, and the information booth. We have Waterfront Park. Then the Village Hall property, which is not, I don't think that's park. And then all the way to Scandia on the waterfront. We have the swamp that butts up
The fire station.
the North Spring Road behind Christy Sully's house there. We have the property where we were originally going to build the fire station on the corner of Mill and South Spring. And then we have the sports complex. I think I got them all.
How about Pebble Beach?
We haven't rezoned that yet.
Okay, all right.
That was my question too. Why isn't that on the map? Because we haven't done that yet.
Okay,
So to me, the list of that Julie, or that's in our packet is, I don't know that there should be, I think the permitted uses are fine. in my opinion, because it talks about, it's basically all public. But when we get to conditional uses, I think 1 through 16 should be deleted, except for, we would keep public boat moorings. And get rid of private, and number 11, get rid of private marinas. And I think everything else is fine. I just don't think if somebody wants to put up archery or horse riding, that doesn't necessarily belong in a parks district. I look at parks as much more public spaces, but that's just me. And if somebody wants to do some outdoor recreation, which I remember during the moratorium, we had an awful lot of conversation about what outdoor rec should include and what that means. And you need much larger parcels of property, not that. I don't see us zoning private property into a park that's not necessarily public. So that's how I read it and viewed it and would want to see it changed.
How about number 9? In case you wanted to, like the Jack Bunda's lighthouse.
But that's on public property.
What about 9 without private in front of it?
Yeah.
Just historic monuments.
Yeah, take out the private.
Yeah,
Because the
Why
village
do we-
might want to,
Well, should that then just be moved up to, if we remove the private and just have historic monuments or sites, is that something that we would move up and to permit it instead of conditional?
sure.
I was just going to suggest, let's have no conditional uses, and if we think it's proper, make it a permitted use and stay away from conditional.
Well, I think 17 through. Oh, plus it also says all the conditional uses allowed in the CS1 district, 19 also. I hate when we do that.
Yeah. So just so you know, that would be assembly halls, bed and breakfast establishments, which we wouldn't want on a public park. So I think that should get stricken as well, that number 19.
Definitely.
And then when you're looking at 20, which is all the, permitted and conditional uses in the institutional.
I agree with that also. Mhm.
Yeah. I know, how about if I take these comments and also break down so you can see on paper what's in CS1 and industrial, and bring this back so you can actually, I'll take out the private things we talked about, clean it up and bring it back so you can really see what you're dealing with.
That sounds great. Rob?
So I thought Dave made a great point that I agreed with. My question is, am I hearing that we're going to remove certain things, but still leave the conditional use provision in? Or are we talking about developing something along the lines of Dave's comment about going to just permitted use only, and then defining what the permitted uses are?
That was my understanding.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that sounds great, Julie.
All right, we'll talk more next
No, you
time.
need to quit volunteering to do all this work.
I'm OCD. I don't like things messed up. I want to fix everything. So,
Okay, yeah.
There's the novelty.
Mm.
We're
Okay.
unaccustomed to it, Denise.
Yeah, agenda item 6Q, discuss proposed text amendment regarding public improvements on private land. Julie?
All right, this is something that's missing in our code. We should clean up anyway. So let me start by giving you an example. If we've been talking about, one of our committees has been talking about trails. And if you get an easement on private land and you put that trail in, the way the code is written now, it wouldn't be to the landowner's benefit to let us do that, because if we acquired land for the trail, we'd be reducing his lot size, maybe to an unbuildable size. Or if we're putting that asphalt trail in there, we're reducing his open space. We're increasing the impervious surfaces, which means he may not be able to build, or it might restrict what he does. Codes that I've worked with in the past usually have a provision in there that says improvements made by a unit of government shall not deem the lot unbuildable, or basically they shouldn't be penalized for those public improvements. Our code should have that as well. Here, I'll give you another example. We go through and widen a road or buy some right of way, all at once we create a non-conforming lot. That landowner should not be penalized because we decided to make a public improvement. What it does is it gives you that balance where we can make our public improvements and the landowner has his property rights protected. He doesn't become non-conforming as a result of that. So this would basically be presenting a text amendment, very short and simple, just like you see in that last paragraph, to the code. It would have to go to public hearing. Of course, we'd put it in with some other ones we're working on. But I don't see how it's not fair to the landowner, and I don't see why we would continue to plan for trails and roads if it means we're hurting our residents.
One thing I see on there that I'm a little leery of, because I've been around here enough to have been trying to think of a better way to put it, seen the village detrimentally impacted by state government for sure. And I don't know that we should just say that anything that is done by the state or the federal government also falls into that, unless it's done in concert with the village. I mean, that there hasn't been a lot of things happening there, and if the village is for it, great. But if it's something that the state just does, because the state has just done a lot of other things, maybe not improvements, but there's been some negative impacts for us. And it's probably a very minuscule amount of things that are going to happen, but I would feel better with that protection.
So you're saying, no public improvement made by a local, you're saying if it's a state or federal one, it has to, we'll exempt it provided it has been approved by the village.
Yeah, and I think I'd actually, with that, I'd also put county in there as well.
Okay.
I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
I think it's a really great point, Nate.
Yes.
What would be an example of the state or the federal government coming in and doing something in Sister Bay that we didn't approve of?
Well, I can give you an example. My family owns some property. It's not the corner lot on Country Walk and the highway. It's the next one in, next to Birchwood Lodge, with that white metal building up there, which used to be a bulk plant with above ground storage tanks for gasoline and fuel oil, which have for decades long been gone. But when the state came in and widened the highway, they created a larger right of way than what was there, and they made the lot much smaller than what it was.
Okay, I understand.
I just had to deal with it, or my
Okay.
family did.
So what we're saying is there would be a provision enacted that would prevent them from doing that without having some discussion or procedure with us as a village.
Yep. Input.
They just wouldn't have, we wouldn't say, there would be we wouldn't have that protection for the landowner unless the village approved it.
Let's think about this. I think it's a good idea to say, hey, state, federal, county, if you're going to do something, you need our blessing on it. I think that's good. But do we want to penalize the property owner if they don't?
I mean, we should, what if the property owner agrees to do it because of that? And that's gonna,
Ah, okay, good point. All right, let me play with that a little bit and bring it back to you, okay?
Sounds good.
All right.
6R, discuss proposed text amendment regarding camping and accessory living quarters.
All right, so I told somebody they had to get rid of their camper off their property, and because it had been sitting there over a year while they were building a house. And he appealed it to the ZBA, and I won. The ZBA upheld it. But one thing that was raised in there, which is something we really need to address, because I don't want to deal with this again, was our code says you cannot camp on property more than 72 hours, okay? But it fails to say, is that in a week, a month, a year? What is it? So we need to put that denominator in there. I believe the intent was 72 hours in a calendar year. So I think we need to make sure it says calendar year, if that is our intent. And then I added here that the camping unit shall be removed from the property after each camping stay. We also don't have that. So, and then when you look at the definitions of camping unit and stuff, it talks about, or when you look at this, it talks about how there has to be bathroom facilities available on the premise, but we don't define what that is. So this would also add that definition. Basically, we're cleaning it up to make sure there's no loopholes in it. And I've got very clear directive that cannot be argued with.
So in the definitions of camping, it's the placement of a temporary shelter used as or designed to be used for sleeping purposes. Examples of shelters used for camping include tents, trailers, motorhomes, recreational vehicles, and tarpaulins. Does that coincide? Do we also mean for motorhomes and recreational vehicles and tents and trailers? Because I think we would, and would we want to expand the wording on that to coincide with the definition?
Well, so you have to look at, you were looking at camping, Denise?
Yes.
Okay, then you have to look at camping unit.
Right.
And that is saying,
Any single shelter except sleeping bags, bedrolls, and hammocks used for camping.
yeah, so it's saying anything but your sleeping bag or your hammock has to be removed is what this would say. I think, when I looked at it, the definitions were fine, except for the fact about bathroom facilities, because we didn't have that.
No, but I mean, the wording in the text amendment, would we want to include the words tents, trailers, motorhomes, recreational vehicles?
No, because it says, it's talking about
Okay.
camping units, so it includes it.
Okay, all right.
So then what we would be saying is if a homeowner in the village has relatives who want to come in and visit grandkids that live in the home, they can't drive a Winnebago up and leave it in the driveway for more than 72 hours in a calendar year.
That's what we say right now, but we really don't have the teeth to say it.
The last thing we want is motorhomes being parked in driveways. You go store that somewhere. Nobody wants to look at that.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to clarify that that's part of what we're talking about. That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If not, we're gonna get challenges at 72 hours in a month. Well, every month we're gonna be dealing with that camper and I'm gonna be chasing campers.
Yeah.
I think the intent was a year. It's just that the words were left out. So,
Okay.
all right. The second part of that is where we talk about, we don't allow living quarters in an accessory building, but we don't define living quarters. So we need to define living quarters. This is basically, I think, the county's definition. I remember when I worked for the county many, many years ago, it was foolproof. had several lawsuits on it, and the definition stood up pretty well. So I think I'm saying we need to come up with a definition of living quarters. And if we're dealing with the camping thing, we may as well address that at the same time. It's kind of on the same thing where you're getting people coming up wanting to sleep somewhere or in something. So let's just move those. My recommendation is to move those amendments forward together.
Why do we necessarily want to keep people from staying in a accessory building if it has, plumbing and whatnot?
All right. Well, a couple of reasons. Density, overcrowding, unsafe living conditions. So if we do not allow guest houses. So if you allow living quarters in an accessory building, you're now getting a de facto guest house on a property. It can add to overcrowding, which is something we don't like in the village. We don't like high density in residential areas. It's unsafe sometimes where they're perhaps not insulated. If there's a big difference between living in a freestanding garage and a house, right? It's different insulation, different R value. There's gas fumes. There becomes a lot of safety reasons why you don't want somebody living in the garage or the outbuilding. So I guess for all those, those are, I think, the common reasons that come to light.
Nate, I'm curious about your question because during the moratorium, we got rid of the second dwelling unit.
I thought we permitted the auxiliary dwelling unit. I thought that was left there for one.
No, we removed it.
It's gone.
I think that it with a condition where we lack enough housing, this is a reasonable way that a lot of America is looking at expanding the dwelling units out there. I think that I just flat out disagree with it, the not wanting density. I think that that's something that the village has a finite land area. And if we don't increase density, we are going to keep the trend of pushing residents from living in the village. I think that's one option we have for being creative with it. And I really do think that we should permit this, maybe with some restrictions.
Or definition of what we expect that dwelling to consist of.
Yeah.
So right now, like I said, we don't allow the guest house on the property or the secondary building. If we want to start allowing, my understanding is we just got rid of that a couple of years
We
ago,
did.
but if we.
No, it was last year.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, got
So-
rid of it.
So if we want to reopen it up and get it back, we can. I don't know what would have changed in a year, but that's conversation for you guys.
I think it came down to the STR impact on there is where it,
Right.
Yeah.
we went.
Yes, that was what we were afraid of.
Okay.
Well, and that nobody was, that happened down the street from me, is that there was a main house. And then the owner wanted to build a smaller house behind the main house. And he was gonna live in that, but STR, the big house. And people were not utilizing it for the mother-in-law guest house or things. The way that we saw that it would be a good thing, no one was using it for that purpose. No one was renting it out to workforce housing because the market in which we live in is always going to lean to the almighty dollar.
I agree with you, Denise. And I think it's, in my opinion, it's best left the way it is.
I mean, I agree and I understand everything that you're saying, Nate. We got to come up with some other, the cluster housing, that we talked about years ago. And I can't even remember if that was way back with Bob on how to get, enough open space, but
Well,
The
could-
old ball field, remember? Yes.
what if we, I mean, like, is there consensus? I think that there was consensus. I mean, there's been some new members since then, that we would be for this if it didn't have the short-term rental impact. That's what I recall, but I don't know if, I don't want to speak for anybody else.
Can I throw this out there? Because you can't regulate ownership, people can use their homes as, as a short-term rental. And then it causes problems on the Wiltsey side, and I hate to always reference that, but in the if we had a single family 20,000 lots out there, you could allow accessory residences and be able to put on a condition, because then it's our land. So on our land, we can put a deed restriction, my understanding, we can put a deed restriction that says into perpetuity, this land shall only be owner occupied.
So Julie, what if say I wanted to put an ADU in my backyard and I were to deed restrict my own property and come to the village and say, hey, I've deed restricted my property. I want to do this. Can I get rezoned as R4 or R whatever? Is that?
The village is not party to private deed restrictions. So,
you can't
no
make a
unit
decision based
government.
on that.
Pardon me?
The village could not make a decision based on that fact that restriction's in place.
Right, because government is not a party to deed restrictions, are not a party to deed restrictions to which they are not a party. In other words, if we didn't require you to have that, we would not be involved in that deed restriction. So that we wouldn't get involved in it.
There's no, I guess what I'm looking for is a way to work that through to get the outcome with working around the existing state law.
I'll give you some examples. When I was in the county many years ago, when you had living quarters and accessory buildings, they weren't plumbed, they weren't electrical. They didn't have potable water. They just weren't safe. They weren't good for the environment. They weren't good for the neighborhood. And that's why the county finally just said, no, we're done. The county now does allow ADUs in some districts, but they do not allow living quarters in accessory buildings unless it is an ADU, an accessory building.
I guess I'm just looking at this as the ADU perspective. I'm not, the accessory building is not that consequential to me. I'm just, whatever we can do to get more dwelling units in the village is going to benefit us, as long as we don't go down, that's my belief, as long as we don't go down that rabbit hole that leads to more short-term rentals. So I guess what I would love to see is to give you those broad instructions saying, this is what we want to see. Is there a way to make this happen? Because last time we did that with an administrator, we were told, nope, this can't happen. But you're really smart and capable, and maybe you're going to come back and tell us the same thing. But I don't know if anybody else feels like that's a good mission for Julie to go down or not.
I mean, if there's a way that we can achieve the goal, I'm certainly interested in how that can be done. And like I said, it's thinking outside of the box, it's being creative, it's writing code that is lawful, and so whatever it is, I'm at least open to hearing about it and how we could do it, and hopefully there would be no unintended consequences.
So I guess what I would do, and I could work on this for a little bit if you're interested. First of all, I wouldn't touch this living quarters thing. Let that amendment go through. You don't want people living in garages that aren't up to code, okay? Then I would look at honoring what we call in some, what the county called, or I don't know if they still do, but hypothetical lots. So if you are in a zoning district and the lot size is 20,000 square feet, and you have 40,000 square feet, in Sister Bay, we say, nope, you get one home. But in other areas, we honor a hypothetical lot, meaning if you can create a hypothetical lot that meets setbacks, we will let you put a second home on there. The reasoning being, if you ever need to separate that off, you can meet it, you can do it legally. So if you want me to put together some language on that for you to review, if that's something you're interested in, it's something to look at. What it does is it allows that second unit in the areas that are not high density. In other words, on larger lots where you have a lower density.
Sure.
All
Right.
right.
I wouldn't restrict it just to the low density though, because I mean, I found our village is only so big. And as we keep, all that's gonna happen is we're gonna keep sprawling out and sprawling out. So, I mean, that from my perspective, what I'm looking for, what I would like to see is that option that doesn't open up the can of worms as the short-term rentals to just enable people to do more short-term rentals, because that's just gonna put a big drag on the infrastructure in place. Where you actually increase density, you don't necessarily need more infrastructure in the same amount of area, because we're not utilizing our local infrastructure that intensely.
Then maybe you look at the short-term rental code that says the only unit that you can short-term rental would be the only unit on the property or something, saying if there's only one building on there, then it can be rented out. I don't know. Let me play with it, Nate. Let me see. Some of those are getting confusing myself. I don't want to say stuff I'm not sure of, that I've legally researched.
I guess I'm just want to make sure you see the big picture of at least where I'm looking at.
Rob,
When we get this hammered out as far as the 72 hours in a calendar year for the no more than that for the camping units, and that's finally on the books, do we need to then incorporate that into the short-term rental rules of the road so that we then have the agreement or the documentation that they're going to sign off on acknowledge that they can't decide to, for a week in July, rent their home out to somebody who's going to bring a camper there for that long?
I thought that's a good question, but I thought it's written that they cannot, something's already in there in the STR. I can't remember.
I just
the
think we need to
exact
double check on that and see if, if we need to revise that accordingly with specifics related to this going on the books.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
STRs have got to follow all the other ordinances, but I think that letting the STR renters or the landlords know that would be helpful. We don't need to tell them that you have to follow all the ordinances. They should know that.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Right. So is there a motion to recommend or go to public hearing on what was on this text amendment about camping and living quarters?
I so move.
Motion by Gretzmacher,
Second,
second by Kane. All those in favor respond with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay.
Can I just say something real quick, Denise?
Yes, please.
Rob brought up a really good point. Short-term rental code does say that it talks about campers, but it says that you cannot use them for additional paying guests. It doesn't say the guest can't bring their camper and they can have more people there. I think we need to look at that.
Excellent. Okay, our next regular meeting is November 22nd. Is that Thanksgiving week?
Yep.
Do we want to have it on the 22nd or do we want to push it off to the 29th, seeing that there's 5 Tuesdays that month,
I won't be here that week, Denise. I won't be here that last week.
the last week? Okay, then the 22nd it is. Agenda item number 8, matters to be placed on a future agenda referred to committee official or employee. The list is long. I don't think we need to go through it. I'm going to presume staff has taken appropriate notes. Unless there's anything else that we haven't talked about tonight that a member would like to see on next month's agenda. Okay. I make a motion to adjourn at 7:59.
Second,
Motion by Berto, second by Gretzmacher. All in favor, respond with an eye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Awesome. Long agenda done by 8. Nice work, everybody.
Good job. We'll see
Good
you guys
night,
next
good job,
time.
Julie. To everybody.
All right,
Good night.
bye.